they're playing with us.
Somebody!
You have to get out of here.
The jungle cannibal movie was once a somewhat popular subgenre, and occasionally you might have had a new movie pop up. But here we have a modern version in River of Blood, directed by Howard J. Ford. And this is actually a British produced movie, although it takes place in Southeast Asia, and I believe was filmed in Thailand for the most part. And it tells the story of two couples who are on an excursion and decide to go kayaking. And they basically get this guy who is a guide to show them what to do and where to go and everything. And for reasons, they end up kind of going on a path they shouldn't, and cross paths of this tribe of cannibals that now hunt them. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss. So this isn't a huge budget movie, but I have to say the biggest compliment I would say with this movie is it's shot fantastically. This really does look like some skill behind the camera here. Some of the kind of the on-location shooting here looks great, both in the kind of the way that these shots are composed, the cinematography, the general camera work, just the variety in different shots. It is a very, very impressive movie in regards to how this movie is put together on a technical basis. I mean, it actually looks, I suspect, a lot higher budget movie than it really is. So props to the filmmakers here for putting together a pretty well put together movie on the technical basis here. I've recognised a couple of these actors from low budget kind of British movies where I know the budget's only been a few £1,000s, and I'm not saying that's the budget for this one, but this one looks worlds above those movies. It really does look good, and even outside of some of the kind of the technical elements, things like the kind of the sound mixing, the Foley design, all good. When we see our gore shots, I think they're done to a sort of a good standard that looks sort of realistic. So yeah, I mean the movie, despite it being somewhat of a meager budget, one would suspect, it does kind of give the illusion at least that this is actually a fairly kind of high production, or at least that's how it comes across to me. So I was very impressed with that. I think the setup for this movie is quite interesting. It actually manages to sneak in somewhat of an environmental message without being too sort of hitting you over the head with it. For example, we're told that there is this cannibal tribe that are basically kind of left alone, and they are in a kind of protected area that is off limits to anyone else ultimately. But because of deforestation, it is basically driving them out, having to hunt animals and stuff out of their kind of protected area, which kind of ends up meaning members of the public are kind of running afoul to them. So this is a good reason why this tribe, which people know about, but they just kind of leave them alone. And there is precedent for this. There is actually tribes in real life that have these kind of protected areas. And again, with the kind of the deforestation angle here, it gives a reason why these cannibals are kind of straying out of their area where they predominantly would normally be. So again, I think it's a reasonable idea to have this inciting sort of incident and the reason why maybe things kind of are happening here. So that was pretty good. It has this kind of ecological message without being too sort of, preachy or kind of stuff like that. I think another element that I enjoyed of this movie is it sort of takes its time getting there. Now, you might argue that the pacing might be slow on one hand, but I actually think the pacing is quite deliberate. because these guys, they're being hunted, and there's we know that these cannibals are out there, and they're kind of stalking in the underbrush, and you can't quite see them and things like that, but you can kind of hear rustling around. And this movie actually does a reasonable job of kind of this building up of the feeling of dread, where the inevitable is going to kind of happen here, and it has this kind of creeping feeling where you're just waiting for that penny to drop. I think all of the actors playing these these cannibals, they're all made up, and look great. They kind of the hair and makeup for them, and looks pretty good, and they look kind of quite threatening with all the kind of the war paint on and everything like that. So that's all kind of quite fun. So I kind of like a lot of the kind of the aesthetics here. And I think the movie is a relatively kind of simple story. It's kind of an enjoyable one. It's not too overcomplicated. It is pretty much what you're going to expect from a film like that in regards to kind of story elements. It doesn't try and contrive too many other issues. There's one thing I'll come on to, but the story itself is easy to follow. It's kind of a good sense of kind of foreboding and dread. Well put together, and a kind of a technical. It looks good, and the acting's reasonable, I would say. The acting is reasonable from the cast here. Everyone does a fairly good job here. I'm not saying this is going to be necessarily going to win any awards for acting, but it's fine for the movie that it's trying to be. So let's talk about what this movie does not work in, maybe. So I would say, if you're going to watch a cannibal movie, you're probably not after subtlety. And maybe this is where this movie falls down, because it isn't the most gory of cannibal movies. And I suspect when you go in watching the cannibal movie, you are going to be expecting a level of gore. This movie isn't without gore. There is a couple of kind of gore sequences, but they are quick. A lot of the kind of the kills and gore sequences are like either after the fact, or it's kind of obscured, or we'll see things like that. We don't really see much in the way of gore. And I suspect that they should have invested a little more into practical VFX. Don't get me wrong, I think when we do see some of the practical VFX, they are to a good standard. We just don't see much of them. And I think that was a mistake. I think the audience for this movie, like I said, probably doesn't want subtlety. They want to be shocked and like have this kind of sequence where it's uncomfortable to watch. And that's kind of what obviously the jungle cannibal movies of old did. I mean, this is why, movies like Cannibal Holocaust or Cannibal Ferox were so shocking, because it was so, for the time, kind of gruesome. And this movie kind of really doesn't ever kind of go there. And I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity to make it a name for itself and have a real sort of stronger movie that would appeal to that kind of fan base. Because I honestly don't think a subtle cannibal movie is what people necessarily are going to want from a film like this. Other issues? This is a film, and this is coming from its British roots, the way it does. I've seen a lot of British movies that do this, British horror films. Inflated personal drama. Why can't we have a group of friends that just get on with one another and help each other and support each other? No, they've always got to be, there's one guy shagging the other guy's wife. They've always got to have some sort of like rivalry or jealousy and stuff like that. The movie, I think, is weighed down by these soap opera elements, and it's a tactic in lower budget movies to fill out the runtime with this kind of thing, where they don't have to kind of pay for stunts, VFX, kind of expensive kind of sequences, so the runtime is filled with this bullshit. And it's so typical. Like I said, it would be a real nice change for a movie to depict a group of friends that actually kind of get on, don't argue, aren't shagging each other's partners and things like this, and not have this inflated drama. It is a decision that was made here that has been made countless other times, and it's so tiresome, and it didn't need to happen. And I think it leads to another problem where the characters end up being unlikable. how much more impactful would it be if these characters seemed like nice people and they got on, and when one of them gets killed, we feel the loss. Instead, we get characters that, you know, come across as somewhat despicable in some terms. And I would have to say the most sympathetic character actually gets killed the quickest and ends up having the least amount of screen time. So, you know, even some of the kind of like the and I think they're thinking it's like characterization. There's one guy, he's like splashing the cash, and he's kind of like you know, oh, I'm Mr. Rich, so I'm going to kind of like throw my money around. Another guy's sleeping with the other one's wife, so this woman is cheating on her husband and stuff like that. And it's just like, what a bunch of despicable people. And do we really care about them? Not as much, I have to say. So it seemed like, you know, the same old way that these movies depict sort of characters. We've got to have this kind of drama. And yeah, you might want to say, well, what's interesting, what's dramatic about a bunch of people who get on? Well, people care about them a little more. And I would like to see more movies that have that. And then we would feel lost more. But they rarely ever seem to do that. Small other kind of little, kind of like nitpicks really. This being a British movie, it's a British cast for the most part, but we still have a character, albeit it's only in a small role, that is putting on a terrible American accent. It is only a small part, admittedly. So, you know, there it is. But overall, I have to say, I still enjoyed this movie. This is still an above average film for me, because I think the positives do outweigh the negatives. And although I would have liked to have seen this movie lean into a little bit more of a kind of the shocking cinema type movie that I think it could have been, it misses the mark. But and as such, some of the kind of the decisions to have these characters be so dislikable again robs it of empathy that you might have. But it's still a watchable film, still very well shot, and if you like the kind of the jungle cannibals genre, there's certainly stuff to enjoy here. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? Please let me know your thoughts, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.